Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah Brackey. I'm the Director of Product Management here at LabKey. And thanks for joining this webinar today. What we'll be doing is walking you through how LabKey software helps support biobanks in aligning with ISBER best practices. And so a little bit about me, sort of prior to getting started. I worked as a bench scientist for over 10 years in immunology prior to joining LabKey, and I've collected and processed all kinds of different samples from mosquito midguts to mice and non-human primate specimens, as well as being part of um, immunotherapy, pediatric clinical trials, and collecting and processing those samples as well. So I've run sort of the gamut in the types of samples, as well as using all types of systems from varying degrees of both complexity and formality for keeping track of these samples and their locations. So by no means am I an expert in this space. However, I do have kind of a good foundation of these challenges that biobanks are facing as they're striving for quality and reproducible sample management processes. So a few logistics before we get started. We are recording this webinar, and so we'll be sending it out later this week. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, and we'll get to them kind of after the presentation today, as there's time. So feel free to kind of put in that. And yes, we're recording, and we'll send it to you after. And so before we dive in on how our software helps support these best practices, really let's acknowledge kind of the foundational role that ISBER has in the biobanking industry. And so ISBER stands for International Society for Biological and Environmental Repositories, and is really widely recognized as the global authority on biobanking operations. So their best practices really serve as a critical reference for biobankers to ensure that reproducibility, uphold those quality standards, and maintain that ethical responsibility in the collection, storage, and use of the biospecimens. So while this webinar is not sponsored by or affiliated or endorsed by ISBER, our goal at LabKey is really to help support and align our software capabilities with that high bar that ISBER sets. And so it's really about helping these biobanks operate confidently within a framework that is trusted worldwide, such as ISBER. If you joined the Montreal conference in May, the ISBER annual conference in Montreal, you'll probably recognize this picture of Varun and I at the booth that we had there. And so, what are ISBER best practices? Well, they're really a comprehensive set of guidelines that were developed to support high quality, standardized, and ethically responsible biobanking operations. And so, they're designed to help biobanks of all types really help achieve that excellence in how they collect and manage and share these biospecimens. And so by following these best practices, biobanks can strengthen the key pillars of their operations. So providing reproducibility in research, ensuring they're following regulatory compliance needs, having sort of that seamless collaboration within the biobank itself, and improving their overall specimen quality. And so today we're really going to explore how software, specifically LabKey software, can help biobanks align with these goals in a practical, scalable way. So a lot of biobanks start out by using Excel, Access, or homegrown systems. And these can be really effective in the short term, but they often start to fall short when it comes to supporting these ISBER aligned best practices kind of at scale and over time. So a purpose-built solution like LabKeys can be designed specifically to help biobanks with these best practices. And so this really means that these softwares can come equipped with things like role-based access control, which helps ensure that the right people have the right permissions. audit trails for that full traceability of sample handling and system activity, ensuring that there's data validation tools that help reduce errors and maintain data integrity, as well as supporting compliance features to support those standards. And then, really crucially, they can be backed by proper security protocols, regular maintenance, and reliable backups. And these are the things that are often overlooked in these patchwork systems. And so the result here is not just better software, but also this stronger foundation for quality, reproducibility, and trust ultimately in the data. And so at LabKey, we're really aiming to empower biobanks with having kind of these ISBER aligned digital workflows that help make it easier to operate with confidence and traceability and compliance within the biobank. And so what we've done is really built our products to build on each other. So biobanks can choose what tools meet their needs the best, whether that's either a small single site collection or sort of a large distributed network. We have kind of a solution for folks that are on either end of that spectrum. So Sample Manager, as kind of a standalone product, is really ideal for biobanks that need robust day-to-day sample tracking and storage management. Because it's intuitive and quick to implement, it's really good for teams who are ready to move beyond spreadsheets or Access or homegrown systems, kind of moving into that built-to-purpose software that we just talked about. LabKey Limbs supports everything that Sample Manager has, but then also goes a step further and allows groups to manage more complex workflows, test data management and analysis, and an electronic lab notebook for researchers who need more from the system and more centralization rather than kind of just the standard specimen and storage tracking. And then finally, LabKey SDMS, which stands for Scientific Data Management System, supports the things that Sample Manager and LIMS has, but then also really can help support these multi-site networks, which offers as well sort of the ability to have custom dashboarding, these advanced integration capabilities with things like RedCap or Tableau, Spotfire, as well as built-in EDC or electronic data capture functionality. And so across all of these tiers, LabKey is very committed to also providing training and support within these tiers. So your team really can focus on that science and not the software troubleshooting, which is really our position. So let's jump in to these ISBER best practices. And so what we've done today is gone in and looked at the best practices that align and software can help with. So these are not the full list of best practices. It's really sort of a curated list of the things that software can help biobanks do. And so this first one is really about sort of the traceability through specimen identifiers. And this is sort of one of the foundational ISBER best practices to make sure that there's that full traceability of a specimen throughout its life cycle. And that can ensure sort of that accountability and reproducibility of the downstream research. The second best practice is really around kind of support for barcodes or RFID specimen tracking. And so ensuring that each sample is both uniquely identified as well as having a unique barcode that can help with the accurate tracking of specimens. And so we all know that, if we can apply some automation or if we can have a tool do this for us rather than rely on our memory or us writing things down, that is going to help with that quality and reproducibility. And so that's kind of the spirit of having barcodes on your tube labels and specimen labels. And then lastly, making sure that the specimen identifiers and those barcodes are printed on a label that's going to stick around for a long time. So making sure that you are able to get that into a label that's both human readable as well as machine readable, and that it's going to stay on the tube throughout sort of the life cycle of the specimen. And so LabKey software can help support these best practices. And I've kind of grouped them all together in this specimen identification and traceability because each one of the features can sort of support multiple of the best practices. So having this enforcement of data-rich and unique sample identifiers through what LabKey calls naming patterns that effectively allow administrators to decide how they want their samples to be uniquely identified. So rather than having just a 9-digit number in that case, you can actually create human readable, legible uh, sample identifiers with our software. Making sure that you also have that unique generation of a 1D barcode. And so we're able to sort of provide that for you, as well as supporting if you have external barcodes. So if you're receiving specimens with barcodes already, you can also configure a field to be an external barcode field. And then around sort of the durability and readability of these specimen labels, one of the things that LabKey software also can help support is by allowing for input from these handheld scanners, as well as an integration with Bartender, which is sort of a leading label design and printing tool that's very printer agnostic. So you don't have to buy new printers when you're sort of choosing a solution. And so these are the things that we'll be showing in this video here. So let's see how we can do this within our software. So you can see that I'm registering some whole blood off of some participants here. And you'll note that in this grid, and I'm going to pause it for a second, we've got a sample ID field that indicates that we have a generated ID. And so as I fill out this information, one of the things that will happen is we're going to pull the collection date information into the generated ID. And you can see that I've also put in this external barcode that I can use for scanning later. And we also have an internal barcode field that we're going to be registering. And so once we've registered these samples, you'll be able to note that the sample identifiers here have that participant information as well as that collection date. And it's giving me a unique identifier. So we're getting basically here deciding an incrementing counter on these sample IDs. And you can note that I've got my external barcode as well, or my internal barcode that the system has generated. I can print these labels with our Bartender integration directly from the system. So I've selected here and said, yes, I want to print this. And then later on, if I have these printed labels and I'm scanning them, I'm also able to do this in bulk action. So here I would essentially scan those external barcodes. I now have a list of those samples that I've scanned, and I can do things like add them to storage or check them in and out or remove them from storage or update their status kind of in those single bulk moves. And so that's really going to help with that that identification of those samples throughout the life cycle. And so the next set of best practices really center around inventory management and the sample findability. And so making sure that there's that specimens are not just labeled and logged, but then also physically findable. Most of the time when people come to us, they're talking about having to spend hours and sometimes in some cases days to find samples that they're looking for without a system. And so really being able to reduce that to a couple of minutes or even a handful of seconds it is super important, especially for groups like biobanks. And so looking at these specific best practices, this first one is really about wanting to have those samples physically findable. So, again, not only logged, but findable. And then beyond that sort of physical tracking, making sure that there are those inventory systems in place that help support these data query capabilities. So if you have your samples logged and you know where they are, it's even more important to know what they are. And so being able to have sample descriptors here is also really important. And then the last thing is around kind of the reporting, which allows for the inventory management system, or the IMS, as ISBER refers to it, to make sure that the tracking of specimen and data has that query capability throughout the specimen and data lifecycle. So again, just making it easier for biobanks to retrieve the information about samples as well as the location on samples as they're going through their daily processes. And so for us at LabKey, some of the things that I've kind of interpreted this as is having a very highly configurable inventory. So one of the things that we've seen, especially with kind of homegrown systems that are less flexible, folks find themselves kind of making do or making workarounds with their inventory systems because they may not have enough levels or the boxes aren't the right sizes and things like that. So making sure that there's a highly configurable inventory so your digital state data matches your physical data is really, really important to us. Making sure that it's also very easy to check samples in and out. So finding samples when they've been in storage for a long time, but then also finding samples during those processing stages, monitoring freeze thaw cycles, amounts, and being able to remove those samples as needed. We also are placing a lot of importance on biobanks to customize their own sample descriptors or sample fields. And so making sure that you are empowered and have the control to be able to adjust what data you're capturing on each of your samples is very aligned with kind of how ISBER wants that best practice wants us to be able to query and find that data. And then lastly, around sort of reporting, being able to use Sample Finder, which is LabKey's version of kind of a search tool that makes it very easy to locate specimens by any field. So either by location or status, participant ID, other metadata such as what tube type or how many aliquots are left can help people more easily identify samples based on metadata rather than location or ID. And then we also provide custom grid views that can be sort of personal or shared that also allow you to sort of create standard reports and help with that consistency across the team as well. And so these are really the features within LabKey that can help support kind of locating these samples sort of after the fact. And so here, let's see, great, it goes straight into the video. What we're seeing for this one is kind of that configurable storage. And so I've created a freezer with a shelf and a rack and a box, and we get this sort of 10 by 10 box, which again, configurable by me as an administrator. I can select multiple samples at once and check them out. I can do this in the box view or a grid view, actually. And I can select samples and check them in. And what we have is an auto decrementing feature as well. And so if I'm checking them out and checking them back in, I'm incrementing that freeze thaw count. I'm also able to decrement the sample amount. And then at each of these stages, people have the control and the power to update because again, we want to make sure that there are no workarounds and that the data within the system is actually matching the physical reality of what those samples are. So in addition, I can also remove samples and mark them either as shipped or consumed, and have that space essentially get freed up in our freezer as well. And so the other thing that I'm showing here, and we'll just sort of pause for a second, is I have about 48,000 samples in my collection right now. one of the things that I'm able to do is create a saved view that shows which samples need maybe a QC review. And so this is something that I can either have saved or shared to collaborate and work across teams. And so if we play this and I go to this filter then is essentially applied where I'm seeing those samples that have QC needed. If I switch to another view, I'm also able to see, what samples that I've shipped this year as well. So again, kind of those saved reports to help reduce sort of the burden on users. This next piece is showing sample finder. And so if we go back to kind of the beginning here, one of the things that I can do from the outset is add sample or source properties to my search and essentially layer them on top of each other. I can also choose a saved search to kind of get me a jumping off point. And in this case, I've created a search first that searches for all samples from male participants over the age of 40. I can continue to layer on this query and generate a more specific report, which is what I'm doing here. So I've got these sample properties that then I'm going to layer some additional whole blood EDTA and available samples within my system. And then from here, I can save the search. I can select these samples and move on and either, again, add them to a pick list. I can choose to discard them. I can export them for a report for a customer or whatever kind of my endpoint plan is. Okay, so for this next one, it's really around kind of the data integrity and quality piece that we talked about at the beginning with these ISBER best practices. And so this first one is really around data reconciliation. So making sure that you have been able to design your samples in a way that allow you to sort of correctly identify discrepancies and having those workflows within the system, as well as then having that data portability and the interoperability. And so making sure that you're able to get data out of the system as easily as you are to push data into the system. And so LabKey has some good tools kind of around this as well. The other piece around sort of that interoperability is also making sure that you can label and name fields the way that maybe industry standard or your consortia or just your biobank in general has sort of decided to name date of collection, for example, as a way to make that more interoperable when you're sharing data out or reporting across other sites in a consortia. And so LabKey actually has a lot of tools for this kind of stuff. And the first one is a pretty basic tool for built-to-purpose software like ours, which allows for this data validation. So making sure that if you have a date field, that date field is valid, or that you have controlled vocabulary around sort of selection of tube type. You can also have calculated columns that take fields of data and will calculate things such as processing window. I think we saw that earlier. We'll see it in the video coming up, as well as the conditional formatting. So again, putting that extra layer of highlighting on data that may be discrepant, that may need that QC review or additional help. We've also had a number of customers use our electronic lab notebook functionality to help centralize their deviation documentation. So rather than having deviations outside of LabKey, they're using the ELN functionality to track those deviations as well as the Part 11 compliance signatures, things like that within the system. And then lastly, you're also able to export data in multiple formats. So essentially making sure that you can get that data out as easily as it was to get the data in, as well as having API support. So you can have programmatic tools that essentially either pull data out or push data in. And then lastly, what we didn't add here are those sort of built-in integrations if you want to push your data to a data lake, for example, or to a more robust dashboard tool is another example of that. So if we look at what's happening here, I'm editing my whole blood sample type just to sort of show you what these fields are. And so we have these custom fields that me as an administrator has defined. And you can see for each of these, I have some basic options of what is the data type that I'm adding? Is that data type required? If it's something like a controlled vocabulary, what are the specific choices that we're enabling for users? But I can also go kind of a step further. So if you look at these calculated fields, we can see that I have the processing window that is making a calculation around the processing date and the collection date, as well as assigning that conditional formatting. We'll go back a screen here that that allows for highlighting data if it's outside of the processing window. And so that really gives me kind of that visual indicator that something is out of range or discrepant. We showed sort of the ability to have those text choices. And then here, this is a little faster than I wanted. And here we also have range validators. So making sure that not only is the date a real date, but the date is within the range that we want to specify. And so that then will sort of force me as I'm adding data to fill out the right date and to prevent errors. And so if we go through this ad again, we can see as I'm filling data out, my tube type is both required and this controlled vocabulary. So I don't get to sort of make that selection. I'll put in a collection date. Note that it's over a year old at this stage. And when I go to finish creating that sample, we're going to get that message that my validator indicated that the collection date must be after that study initiation date. And so here, I've sort of created that new sample. I have that processing window that's being calculated for me, as well as that conditional format that highlights it as well for that visual indicator. And I've got some save views here that also give me a short list of things that I need to do. And so if we look at the ELN associated with these samples, I've actually already started to fill out this deviation report around that processing window being out of range. And so this is something then that I can submit to a QC manager or somebody around. I can export and print this as well if I need to. And so here we'll just kind of have that last signing. Once I've submitted this and signed it, it's now out for review, and my coworker Lance has gotten an email essentially that he's got a review to do on this. And so that can be a way to sort of track discrepancies or other sort of data sample related uh, non-standard data within the system. And so the last one here is really around sort of auditing and compliance. And so the ISBER best practice really talks about having those audit trail capabilities from an IMS, which is that inventory management system, to help support the transparency, compliance, accountability of what was changed within the system, when the change occurred, who made the change, and also the reason for that change. And so making sure that all of this is getting tracked in a system. This is another thing that many folks come to us having used Excel or Access, that those tools are really lacking, that they're looking to bolster or make more robust with a built-to-purpose system. And so LabKey, kind of as promised, as advertised, definitely has robust auditing. And we do this in a variety of different ways to make it more user-friendly for sort of end users for troubleshooting, as well as maybe QC managers or people that might be reviewing the system. And so we have our sample timeline tool that is a sample-centric view of everything that's happened to each specimen, and is very good for sort of troubleshooting purposes. We also provide a location timeline. And so this is really a troubleshooting tool when you have your digital system and you have your physical system, you go into your freezer, you open your box, and the box is not exactly aligned with that digital system. The location timeline can help you identify what went wrong or where there might be a discrepancy. And then we also have our full audit logs, which are essentially a separate view on these sample and location timelines, but they're aggregated into grids. And so people can sort and filter. They can't change anything, but you're able to sort of look at much larger sets of data at one time. And then lastly, we also have this ability to require comments for data changes. And so by requiring these comments, you can always include that reason for why data changed as well. And so here we'll take a look at some of these things, and we're going back to the whole blood. We'll go into one of these QC needed samples. Right on the sample's details, I'm able to see the timeline. And so this is showing me everything that has happened to the sample since it was registered. So you can see that I registered this earlier last week. And then you can see all of the other actions that I've taken on the sample. And for each of these events, you can select and see exactly what changed. And if there was a comment, in this case, we have them optional, but if there was a comment provided, that comment is also included in the timeline. If we go to the location view, I'm actually able to see now this location history. So this is pretty basic, that one sample was there. But let's say I go into my box and A6 actually has a sample within it. That might be a little bit interesting, and why has this happened? To be able to look at the location history of A6, I'm able to see, oh, Hannah removed this last week. Perhaps she removed it from our digital storage, but not the physical storage. Let me go and check up with her on this. And so that allows me to make some have some easy troubleshooting steps when something like that may occur. And so from here, I think we're going to go into sort of the more robust audit log. And this allows me to see all of those sample timeline events from any sample in the system throughout time. And so I can sort and filter. We can see what change was made, by whom and when, and then of course as well what those comments would be. We also have many other audit logs that indicate things that have happened to domains or sample types, source types, the kind of infrastructure that's put within the system. And then the last thing here we're able to select and define is why do we want those comments required? And so I've switched now to yes. And so what this means when I'm checking samples in and out is that I need to provide a comment. And so as we see on this sample, I'm selecting to check it out. That comment field is now required. And so I wouldn't be able to check that sample out without providing a comment as well. And so together, these tools really offer that full transparency and traceability, which align with those ISBER best practices and help prepare your repository for sort of confident compliance within the system. And so to sort of wrap up here, in addition, LabKey also provides really great value for biobanks and biorepositories and can be very cost effective. So when we're looking at that sample management tool, that can be a really good entry point for folks with limited resources. We also pride ourselves on making it very user-friendly, so you're able to make adjustments over time as you need to, as well as scalable. So we know that many biorepositories and biobanks out out there have millions of specimens in their collection, we're able to handle and support as you scale as well. And then the last thing is really around our support. And I was a customer of LabKey prior to coming to LabKey, so if that tells you anything about how great LabKey was at supporting me, it is one of the things that we really pride ourselves on and continue to, again, want to let you focus on the science and we can focus on that software piece. So after this, you'll be getting an email around scheduling a demo with me. I'd love to do a deep dive demo kind of based on your specific scenarios. And so go ahead and get that scheduled. You can also take a tour of Sample Managers. So if you're interested in learning more, and then of course we're going to share these recordings as well. So keep an eye on your email for kind of these things that are coming up. And if you have any questions, please kind of put them in the Q&A. Okay, great. Yeah. So one of the first questions is, can we make adjustments to the sample descriptors over time, or are they fixed? And it's really it's really is sort of flexible over time. So you can continue to sort of add sample descriptors, add other drop-down options to those text choices, or layer on those validators as needed. And so again, one of the things that LabKey wants to do is sort of empower you as a biobank to make these changes on your own without having to rely on an IT group or a third-party group. And so we allow you to do that, and that is one of the things that our training and support is really focused on as well, making sure that you can make those adjustments because science isn't stagnant, it changes all the time. And so we want you to be able to do that as well. Other questions? Great. Yeah. So what does validation of our software look like? So we talked a lot about data validation and being able to validate the data coming in. But LabKey also offers a software validation pack that we actually work with Compliance Path on. And so our third-party partners effectively can provide an installation qualification and an operational qualification pack with each release. And then optionally, folks can work with Compliance Path to do a process qualification, or they can do their own process qualification as well. Any other questions? Okay. Well, feel free to schedule a demo or send me questions if they come afterwards. And again, kind of check your email because these things will all be coming after that. Thank you for your time and have a great day.